Foundation Course Kabbalah, Part 2, Lesson 42, Rabbi Michael-ben-Pesach, Portnaar. In Hebrew is 42. Mem Bet. Mem has the number 40 and Bet 2. This is an important number because Mem Bet is one of the holy names. This name takes care of the spiritual rising from one step to another. Therefore, it is an important number. Later, we will learn more about this. You should be focused on one thing, not this and that. It does not work that way in the spiritual. You go for 100% or not. It is what it is. In the spiritual, it is so. In our world, you can. You do this and something else in addition, everything, but in your own spiritual development, it is impossible. In September 2005, I'm going to give lessons of Zohar and the Tree of Life in the original language. I translate it and give comments. I'm going to do it that way so that it will give you food, taste, delicious food. I want to build the lessons so that everyone will be able to learn it at every level. By listening to what I say, you can learn Kabbalah without coming to our lessons. It is working on yourself, but not only working on yourself, you must also think of the common good. Spiritual, absolutely. So try inwardly to connect yourself with others, but not by drinking vodka together and embracing each other, etc. What I mean is this. I will give you lessons in Kabbalah only under the condition that I give them anyway for the common good. Public interest means to take into account the whole world and not just sharing the stuff with you. Not only passing on the learning material, but also the method. How you correct yourself. How can I say? By everything I do and think and my efforts, the primary function of which is to make correction, even what you do not see. I try that. I try to hold myself to the tree of life. It's very nice, but I'm learning Zohar. There is nothing higher, and I try, as I'm here even if I'm not here, but mainly I'm here to do spiritual work internally, from within, along with the passing of the learning material. I'm doing certain spiritual Kabbalistic operations which are invisible, where I try to connect all of us, as soon as I can come in connection with one man, which works already through onto others, step by step. That's what I try to do. It is important that we get to it through our study, not playing a comedy, that we gradually come to realize that there is no difference between us, between Jews and non-Jews, Arabs, etc. It does not matter. Everyone, on the one hand. Of course, such a thing exists as the root of every nation. Your root you have to follow. You should not be uprooted by this and that. The superstructure, that what we are going to experience, what we will experience gradually, not play games, but feel that there is no difference between humans. I mean difference. What is difference? That we are connected. Difference, I mean everyone is unique. Absolutely. I try to put it into words. This lesson is very important. I hope that I can express it. It is important that you not resist whatever you hear from me. It is absolutely a different course. Try that. Absolutely not resisting. You should not be a yes man, but also do not resist. You always have your opinion. Later, when the lesson is over and you go away, but try here, if you're here, not to struggle. Why? Again, as to what I said in the beginning, we do here not just our own personal work. We try to connect for the public interest within ourselves. Without that, you can forget that you accomplished something. If you only think about your personal development, without that you are able or want to repair ties between the people, I mean inside, you can never come out. The intention is that we come into the spiritual, an experiencing of the eternal, and therefore we cannot go around the fact that we, the general, because there is particular and general. There is nothing in the individual which is also not in the general. You cannot shut down or isolate yourself. I will develop myself and what it's all about. I do not care. It's very fine what we do. So as a result thereof, when you come to class and I do the work and you do your part, everybody longs and wants to participate. In the same direction we have to go. One direction. Look, I have a Jewish root. You have a Christian root. Maybe even Buddhist root. No matter what. Another has an Islamic root. It does not matter. If we are here, it is transnational. Kabbalah is transnational. Has nothing to do with whatever faith you understand. It still starts before man. Before the religion. You understand. Therefore, if you come here to the lesson, what you hear from me, accept it. Not that I do not say a word for myself, so just accept it. How can you accept that? You've learned to think critically. It's good. But for about 2 hours, the idea is that you take it in. Something you take in, something where your organs of perception are not yet developed for. Take it from me. So try to join all you hear. For example, if you feel that you resist from inside, maybe you have certain views. We're all grown-up people, and then I say something. Try to overcome at that moment. Do not blow yourself up. I feel that you resist, and then I feel one or two people who are resisting, then I'm going with a part of my powers. I want to do spiritual work during lessons here. Then I'm going to spend that to neutralize the power of that person. It is understandable, but it is then you deprive yourself to the common interests, you take away a piece of power. And when you get on top of it and you say, okay, that's my opinion, I understand nothing of this, and that is why I fight against it inside, that you say, for the common good, even if I do not understand it, maybe for public interest, yet I do now work from inside, that I still go along with what he says. You understand? Make yourself small. That you say, I absolutely do not understand how that is possible. My view is that. My common sense tells me this and that, and what he tells me I do not understand, but I'm in. With it you grow also. Do you understand what that means? That is just a general doctrine, because you hear me also. For example, every lesson, I tell, for instance, several times, more than once. I say often already from the beginning, things that look like attacks on my own brothers, yes or no. I regularly say my brother's this and my brother's that, a little humiliating, trivializing or ironic or worse. And then, of course, with our students of Jewish origin, it may seem a bit strange. What the hell is that? Of course. I, for example, also speak of rabbis, and I say something about integrity. I know of no rabbi that did not find honest. Absolutely. Here in Amsterdam are all honest people, you understand. I absolutely do not attack anyone. I have no conflict with any rabbi. Always a very good connection, and has absolutely nothing to do with what I say. If I say something, and therefore I say something about the Pope, not that I'm talking about the Pope, but about someone, then, for example, a very high religious function. But I never talk about that person himself. But from the Christian side, I have not had a feeling that someone resisted. That does not mean in your heart you feel maybe what I say, even if you believe in yourself that I'm saying anything against your faith. Defeat it. Say, I do not understand. I trust that it is good. Then you join the class to receive the ultimate in what you came here for. Okay? Try to overcome it all. Also others, such as your younger people, such as our younger people, students of Jewish origin, because common sense of the people says, okay, you said once about rabbis or so, that they do not teach Kabbalah, and that all the misery in the world is to come therefore. That's said enough. Understand then, I'm from inside doing spiritual work, and I'm no longer the master of my words. I say what I say. I do not know why I say it. And if I say it again, it means that it is necessary, once again, to make certain corrections. You understand? But on the other hand, I still want to somewhat understand, perhaps understanding or experience of why I say that. Why am I talking about? It is understandable that my brothers, our Jewish students, why do I talk about that? What sense does it make for the Christian or other? It is their internal matter. What have we as Christians, as you are each time talking about those brothers, that they do less good, that your brothers are guilty, that they only learn open Torah and not the secret Torah? Tonight, I want to keep this lesson that we understand that this concerns us all. Whether you are Christian or Buddhist, no matter what you are, or you are nothing, even just a vegetarian, you understand no meat nor fish. What I want tonight is to give a very important lesson where you, among others, shall understand that when I talk about Jews, what the purpose is, why I'm so fiery as I talk about it, and understand how it also affects you, not only the Jewish participants, but it matters to every one of us. Why that is so, because then I talk about the system of the universe and you'll understand why it is so. Then we will all know that. Very important. Try to overcome yourself. Whatever I say tonight, that you do not resist and say, he again spoke about the Jews. That you will understand tonight what I'm talking about and why the whole world always looks to Israel. The eyes of everyone all over the world are focused on Jerusalem, with care, with desire. Why is this so? Also, the non-Jewish souls who have instinct, not only what they have taught, the Torah, etc., the faith, but instinctively, we will understand that there is something happening. Let's say the last moment. The main battle is, of course, in my heart, and that is why I want to talk a bit about that. Principles. Always we must proceed from principles. If you learn the laws of the universe, you should always start from principles, not from a separate issue. You must start from principles, thereby then can any other, thousands. From a principle you can derive thousands of cases. That's the point, that you learn to deduce. So learn first principles. We have said the first world of Adam Kadmon, the first 5 receipts of light. That's all very thin. The Sfirot were so, Keter, Chochma, Bina, Ze'ah, and Malchut. Everything actually consists of these 5 Sfirot, and Ze'ah consists of 6, which is why we sometimes speak of 10 Sfirot. How then came the light in that early phase of the 5 Sfirot from one receipt to another? Keter to Chochma, Chochma to Bina, from the top down to Malchut. Malchut receives everything, and Malchut is on the one hand the last of the Partzuf. Partzuf means spiritual object from above, while the name Malchut is Keter of the next. The Malchut is the last of the higher and is the first that comes. It's like having 2 in himself, 2 elements within itself. Something of the higher, the last of the upper, and the first of the lower. It was in all those receipts, say 5 Partzufim, Adam Kadmon, 5 receptions. It was all so in that way, so the light was transmitted. And then Malchut again gave light to the next Keter, Chochma, etc. You understand? And we have seen that Bina, when the Bina, as Partzuf Sag, runs down, there what was divided into 2. That was Keter, Chochma, Bina, Chesed, Guvara, Tiferet, and Netzach, Hod, Yesod, and Malchut. It was divided into 2. It was for the first time division into 2 types from the moment of Bina, when it was divided into 2. Upper was receiving. Upper was, let's say, root of what we call good, and the bottom was at word the root of evil. Wherever there is light is good. Without light is evil. So we should be seeing it a little bit and not that evil is something else. So from that moment there was division. Every 10 Sfirot or any Sfirah or any Partzuf, each world was divided into 2 now. Top and bottom, or top and under. And that is very special. What will happen from now on? From now on, if I draw it like this, then it is so. Look, the upper Keter and the lower Malchut. Previously, it was the case, all under one another, and then the next. Refer to the written materials. Keter, Chochma, Bina, Ze'ah, Malchut. What has become now? Keter and Chochma remain above, and that is, let's say, that's step one, which remain above. So Keter Chochma remain above, so you should see, written full out, we have 10 Sfirot, but normally 5 Sfirot, as it is here, and Ze'ah has 6. Keter and Chochma remain above, and Bina, Ze'ah, and Malchut fall down. So Keter, Chochma, then the separation, and then Bina, Ze'ah, and Malchut. Those three fall down to the next step, and there is the next step. Look carefully. What has become? And you can see the step one, Keter Chochma, then the separation again, and step two, Bina, Ze'ah, and Malchut. Slowly, slowly, the whole Zohar is about this. We're going to learn experience. It is used to be one step, and the next step was just underneath then. Malchut, Keter, etc. Again, the third under each other. See figure 3 on drawing 1. Did they have no contact with each other? Just above gives the lower, and there was no possibility of a step which is under in order to come up. So how can you come up there? How do I get strength to get up? You know what I mean. How can I go up? A lower step gains strength to get higher. And there was a wonderful provision made in creation, in the plan of creation, and therefore we know that we can do that. A note from my wife a few days ago that a lot still defines man, and I said absolutely not. And not that I say that, but the Zohar tells it. Each lot, a man can go beyond. Absolutely. Why? I speak not of me, I speak from the operating system. I focus on the operating system of the universe. We're also going to slowly to see how it all works. So it was in the beginning, figure 3, drawing 42.1 in the written materials, the time when the world was first created by din, severity. So first the plan was, in human language, we speak now, of course, the Creator has created, wanted to create the world with severity, the withdrawal of the light, as for example with an army. Real severity, so just, subdominance from above. You could never come up. And then we have seen that every step was divided into 2. Why was it divided into? To give a helping hand to the lower. Look what happened here. The step 1 is also divided in 2. Look at figure 2. Thus, Keter, Chochma, and Bina, Ze'ah, and Malchut. Those 3, Bina, Ze'ah, and Malchut, fell into the second step, figure 1. And in the second step, sitting here again, Keter and Chochma, and there is inside. You have to see it this way, for it is dropped inside, as it were, just as in a cylinder, dropped down below, and below you also have Bina, Ze'ah, and Malchut. Still figure 1 of the second step, and then again the same step, and so on in the same way further. Very important that we just look at this, because Zohar begins with it, and all the corrections follow this way. Try not to think intelligently about it, but just look. Look, let's say the second part of a higher step drops in the upper part of the lower, of the following subordinate step. It is very important that we know this. That is Keter and Chochma of the first, and then there is Bina, Ze'ah, and Malchut of the first falling in the second. So the lower half of a higher, because now every partsuf is divided into 2. A higher, we just said higher is good. The upper part of the 10 Sfirot is good. And bottom, where there is no light, is evil. In other words, we might say upper is altruistic and lower one is selfish desires, for example. Let's say giving kilim. Kilim is something that receives light. Giving kilim, which are Keter and Chochma, are the receiving kilim. What does giving kilim mean? These kilim only want to give in terms of their nature. Keter and Chochmah are very light kilim, beginning. It's like the light, but they are also. And Bina, Zah, and Malchut, which are kilim of receiving. So we need them to receive. What to receive? To receive Chochmah, to receive wisdom. And these do not need it. Why? It comes later. Now just principles. Now, very special. How come then tonight is also lesson 42, the name Mem Bet? Mem equals 40 and Bet equals 2. Together it's 42. And this name also causes the rise of a step to another. But look, how does the rising go? How does it work? How is the communication back and forth between the two? So the top is higher, more spiritual than the lowest. The first step is higher than the second. The higher lowered the second part to the upper part of the lower. Why comes later. And so the Creator arranged it all, and down, the task of the step down is to come out of his malchut, only to the upper part. So that's again what we call evil or darkness, the bottom always. Bina, Zah, and malchut. And Keter and Chochmah are good, altruistic desires. So, the task of the bottom of the second is to itself, as it were, to his kilim, the kilim of receiving, Bina, Zah, and malchut, to come out on top, so as not to receive egoistically. Then, the bottom, what is the bottom? Look, what is the whole correction? The lower rises to his own kilim of giving, kilim that wants to give. You can only go up to your own 5 sfirot. You cannot go up. How can you have power to get higher? If you're kilim, you can still muster strength so you can take the first step. The first stage is that you step by step, that you come to your own giving kilim. Okay, in that way, you stand in the same height as the lower part of the upper kilim. You stand. Bina, Zah, and Malchut of the upper, and you, your Keter and Chochmah, are on the same level. What means at the same level? There's a law, spiritual law of the universe. If two objects, parts of Fim, we say, are coming to stand at the same height, then they have something in common. You understand? Then they are the same property. Of course, that Bina, Zah, and Malchut belong to the higher step, but Keter and Chochmah, they are now come to be at the same height, which experiences exactly the same properties, and when Bina, Zah, and Malchut of the upper lower themselves, then they adapt completely to the Keter and Chochmah of the lower, because they are on the same level. What if I give an example of Yehuda Ashlag, who also used this, an educator of a young person, a youth worker who was taking a job on himself, occupational or whatever, a community worker who the young people who are in the street and doing all sorts of things to lift them up from the bad environment. He is higher than them. He is of good lineage. He is doing well, and he now wants to go on to the streets to youngsters who misbehave, to get them out of there. How does he do it? He's a decent guy, has university education, learned everything. How does he do it? First, he's going to wear jeans. He perhaps puts a necklace in his nose, a cigarette, a little swinging. What more? All kinds of other things. So a tattoo, not really, I don't know. Cool things. Leather jacket, boots, and such. And then he goes to the street to the young people to gain confidence. And they look at him and see a nice guy and will have confidence in him. What does he do then? He adapts to them, or they would not accept him. So he goes down, as it were, beneath his position. Not that he becomes like them, not that he's going to steal and do other weird things, but he dresses up that way to give them a helping hand. And then he goes to do a little tough with them, and he wins confidence from them. And then gradually, when he has confidence, he is at the same level with them, but he is of higher step. And when they hang on to him, they must have confidence in him, and they do feel that he has something in him, in himself, what they don't have. And if he succeeds, in that way, if they can find in themselves the good, these youths, by his example, of course, and he pulls them ever upwards, then they can, look here, Malchut, for example, Ze'ah, which are all still, they do still all weird things on the street, but gradually they go, look, hey, he reads a book, takes them to a library or something else. Step by step, he takes them higher. Just go and read. Then they come in their own giving kelim, in their own goodness a little. And then, once they get there, at their own keter and chochmah, as it were, then they are at the same height as his lower part. And if there is sufficient demand from them to the keter and chochmah to match the underside of the upper, they're going to shine. Show that that's enough in the spiritual world, that there is sufficient demand with the higher to pull up his lower part, to not have those two things, but to restore all 5 sfirot together, and that's called gadlut, large state, when real light is received. Chochmah, and not light of Hasidim, a weaker light, which is thus drawn up, and look now what the situation is. Look what it becomes now. Bina, Ze'ah, Malchut are then pulled up, and as it were, the border disappears, becomes only Keter Chochmah. Here it is the next state, Keter Chochmah, Bina, Ze'ah, and Malchut, above. Okay, and if there are 5 sfirot, one below the other, means that it is the perfect light. If those 5 or 10 sfirot are divided, then it means that light can only come this far and not below it. You can understand. Short light. And there was light in all 5 sfirot. You can receive here all 5 lights, which are there. The trick is that, because these, in the state, small state, figure 1, when above are Keter and Chochmah, and the 3 lower are below, that's called small state, Katnut. What does a small state mean? Only giving kelim, only in those 2 sfirot, one gets light, and the art is that when they, we have said as the upper, a higher step comes to a lower step, then that becomes just as the lower step. Like that youth worker who comes on the street, and then he's just like the young people. The police then knows no distinction when he has no identity papers that he is cooperating with the police. He is tackled just as hard, you understand. So when a higher comes to a lower, he will be just as lower, and when lower comes to a higher, then it is just as the higher. You understand? Therefore, it is absolutely relevant. The most important thing in our world is the environment which you choose. Absolutely important, even if because you're going so fast with the Kabbalah, your development every 3 months would have to make new friends, nothing to do about it. You see, after 3 months, you have already made such progress, again, that you say, what should I do with these people? 3 months ago, I could still talk to them, and now no more. It is, then you should not try to appease your feelings of guilt. How can that be? Must still, forward, higher, 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 absolutely higher, and not thinking that those friends, they will survive, you understand. You absolutely must understand this principle. Thus, when that lower, the lower portion is dropped down, that they attach themselves to each other, as it were, those young people who attach themselves to the youth worker, one day, he takes them to his house. He went up with them in the neighborhood, Gradi. This educator who came down to these young people, he was in that Gradi, doing cool things, and then suddenly says against them, guys, come to me, and then they come in a nice home where he lives, just normal home, a home which the young people are not accustomed to, and he gives them tea, coffee, and he lets them see that he does all those rings away, etc., puts on decent clothes, and they do not recognize him, but they already have the connection with him. You can understand. They cannot beat him or whatever because they have been somewhere on a level with him, just from his bottom, and now he talks to them and pulls them up. You understand? Similarly, the spiritual, all the same, our world is also a reflection of the higher. Then what means? If the lower side of the higher step comes up, automatically also go up the Keter Chochmah of the lower one. So the top edge of the bottom, let's say that it's here, the upper, figure 1. Bina, Ze'ah, and Malchut in the red circle, you see what it has become. So, those all came up, and with them came two, Lin, Keter, and Chochmah of the second. And under these still remains Bina, Ze'ah, and Malchut, three lower of the second. So goes the correction. That is the intention, so that in this way, in this ingenious way, the creator of the world has created a system where it is possible to step by step get further, 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 unnoticed as it were, to go forward. How can you go forward? We learn to come to class and then you read something. You know you can go forward, unnoticed. You get, your job is always to the bottom of what is sunken in you, to long for that and cling to that good. And that lower part, upper part, which is sunken into you, okay. First, it is always perceived as darkness. Why do we feel darkness in ourselves? It is a wonderful thing if we feel darkness, only not because of our sins, of course, but if we feel darkness, you should know that you're in the right track. So not that you sin and then suddenly have darkness. Of course, that's just like having a hangover. You have darkness because you have too much to drink, but if you do your best and still get darkness, for example, you feel good, had a rise, and suddenly you feel the next day depression, what should you do? Then you ask in despair, what should I do? Should I do anything? If you feel depression, good depression is a wonderful thing. Kabbalah begins to work in you, which means that the man has never really worked on himself. Applies to us all. Suddenly he goes to work on himself and suddenly he feels darkness in himself, and that is a terrifying feeling. Because suddenly you see it as it were at the bottom of the higher step, which is in you. For all stair steps are inside you, not in me. You understand? Only through what I tell you can recognize your own higher step. But always you work on your own kilim, and not those of someone else. So at that moment, suddenly you feel depression. It means you suddenly feel darkness. Darkness you feel because you are now already experiencing all of these bottom, Bina, Ze'ah, and Malchut, of the higher step. So the first experience of the higher that is in yourself, gives a feeling of darkness. Your job is not to leave the battlefield because of darkness. Why is it darkness? Why should there be darkness when I come to stand at the same height to experience that? First, you get a little bit in there, a little bit in that sector of Bina, Ze'ah, and Malchut, not completely. So, your task is to come until all your Keter Chochmah of the step that you have experienced now, where you work, that it fully matches the three lower. With the lower part, Bina, Ze'ah, and Malchut of the upper, once you come in full agreement with that, then you experience, how do you say, relief and light, because you have come into agreement with the lower portion of the higher step. And that is immensely higher than anything that you could experience so far. You understand? If you can muster at that moment, then you rise together. You give, so to speak, impulse to the educator of yours, and he brings you then to the good. Then the educator does not need to play a comedy anymore with you. He sees that you are ready for it. Then he takes you to a better environment, pulls you out of the misery, you understand. And then you go to a higher one. That is the system, briefly. System of how man. The whole Zohar is built around this at different steps, because if we learn Zohar, we come from one step to another step. And always in this way, always we'll see what three elements, which three Sefirot forces are associated with the correction. Always three are connected. That is briefly what I wanted to tell you, schematic. Well, now, it is so that everything that is higher than what is lower can inwardly be imprinted regarding what is underneath, that is outward. What we now see, the higher step, which lowers his outer part to the lower step, and while the underlying step goes to show agreement with his inner, so the upper, the inner part of two, see figure 1, and that's the outer part of the higher, and the second step. Keter Chochmah is the inner part of the second step, and Bina, Ze'ah, and Malchut of the second step is, again, outward part of the second step. So it all goes down and up in the same way. the principle that always is in you. If you want out, when you want to get to the good, if you want to go to the life, then you should always in yourself, these three sfirot, the lower part of the higher, to experience that in yourself. Those three things in you, that lower part of the upper, that is actually your God. That is your God. Who? God is, of course, I do not mean your God beyond by time. God, that which you want to merge with. That means flow together as comes in you. The five sfirot and the higher sfirot of your Keter Chochmah, and you want to merge, as it were, match with the lower part of the higher, means that you wish for the lower part of the higher. You understand? There is no other way than this way. You do not need to understand yet. Just look. Try not to strain your brain, your mind, because then you get confused. Once you begin to rely on your mind, then you're sold. Remember that very well. Or Oriental, who has more heart, has more confidence in his heart. Also, that's not okay, because it's only one-sided, which relies on his heart, as a Westerner on his mind, and then you get short on your mental part, because it is so. So man is made so that the mind and the heart form one, being one, no difference between the two, which are fused together, and you cannot tear them apart. Remember that very well. If you try to understand at all costs, means that you pull out your mind from the whole, and you can only experience the true reality as it is melted. If your mind and your feelings form a unity, thus man was created, and a Westerner who naturally draws the mind out of the whole and wants to play the boss with his head, and the Oriental pulls just feeling heart to himself, both have shortage. Only one comes short. Oriental, I always talk about states and not about peoples. An Oriental always feels at one end the connection with the higher. With his heart feels quite good, but is shortage. He does lack, because he still pulls his feelings from the mind. It's not possible. Good, the true reality, is intellect and feeling united. And the Westerner is pedantic by dominating his intelligence by centuries over his feelings, and of course never comes that way to fulfillment, to happiness, to fulfillment, absolutely not. And therefore both sides of one coin. And so we see step by step that Oriental is also coming to the West through each other. Westerner longs for the East, can never help him so. As a Westerner does a shift to the East and goes, I'm just saying it to you, as a Westerner goes to the East, he tries to experience Buddhism. Of course, it comes because of a lack, because he realizes that his mind dominates. He feels shortage. He goes to the East. He wants Buddhism or whatever. I say not a word that it is wrong. But as a Westerner does such a jerk to the other side, it will spring from one deficit to another. To the contrary shortage, you understand, he wins absolutely nothing, and it's even misery if someone does so trying, for example. For example, a Westerner who goes to Tibet and will behave so, then calls Hare Krishna, Hare Hare, 2-3 words, and they're happy. Look how much it agitates me still. 2 words. And then they are ready. You know why? The East does not need more. The Oriental feels happy. He has enough with those 2 words. And then he does something with his hands and it's done. It's enough. But it is not true reality. And therefore, as a Westerner is going to do as Oriental, that's even though he does it honestly, it is still comedy. Why? He never gets the true reality in mind. Then you will never get fulfilled. Likewise, if an Oriental comes to the West, he comes down here and will do technical high school in Delft. After 5 years, he's an engineer, as Johnny and Stickler. Well, does it mean that he is integrated? He must give up his Oriental root. Impossible. Look here. Near where I live is a phone shop. It's a Japanese. Speaks perfect Dutch. But it is to feel that he is not Dutch. I can feel his soul, Oriental soul, of course. That man is integrated, absolutely, but he has his own root, Oriental root, which can never be penetrated by a Westerner. You also should not do. He has his own root and you have your own root, and he's of course adjusted easily. Here in Western society, why? He needs only to use his head and he's done. But he's Oriental and he must always comply with his own root and not to try to integrate here. Integrating is of course social, but never break your root. Where can you hold on to? Absolutely. One question. Bina. We have said that there are 10 sfirot, and Bina first stood up far above the line, the Parsah. And now, as we present it as 5 sfirot, then Bina is under the Parsah. It comes later, now first principles. Here we have written 10 sfirot, figure 2, and here 5 sfirot, figure 3. So as 10 or 5 depicted. But of course there are always 5 sfirot, which are the basic sfirot that exist. We say only 10 if we need to portray the aspect of Ze'ah, Ze'er Anpin. And then we say it is 10. But normally it's 5 sfirot. Everywhere 5. Hand is 5. Foot is 5. Everything, we will see that many things are 5 in creation. So far I've only just broached how it works. Now, or how it is from the moment when the separation was made. Therefore, this provision is made from the top that the higher, each higher is required to help a lower, and the lower is required to stick to the outer part, lower outer portion of the higher, to stick to that. Look at all those movies as we see in Hollywood films, and then we see if someone begs for mercy to a king, what does he do in those movies? Falling to his feet, he kisses his feet as it were, yes or no. So you should also do from the inside towards, feeling towards a higher step that is in you, and then you should not be ashamed because it all is already your kilim, your own material. A man does say, what have I to do with God? God to do with that is the lower, that lower portion of the higher step in you. This means that there are certain layers in your inner self that you never could have experienced so far. And then you say, what the farmer does not know, he does not eat. And you think God's somewhere there, and I'm here. No, everything is within you. Outside of you, absolutely, but in you are layers of your inner self, which you should be able and wish to have that experience to bring that to life. If you're begging for that, if you reach for the Bina, Zah, and Malchut, the bottom 3 of the higher, you grab them, you feel darkness because they are higher. Why do you feel darkness? If you come to the level of Bina, Zah, and Malchut, of the higher, why? Because the higher you experience the underside of the upper, and that's terrible because that is far greater than anything you could ever experience. And you must desire it. Why? Because by it you will experience more of your inner self. That means something that was dead in you comes to life through your comprehension, by your understanding what is the lower part of the higher. Should you oppose, you're working against yourself, against your own inner self. You can understand God within yourself, nothing else. You can understand only creative power exclusively within your inner self and not otherwise. You cannot understand with your head, therefore all the misery we or in the East that they are trying to understand God only by their sheer surrender. It is amazing. For example, if you see this guru in all the Dalai Lamas, all the great surrender, but of course it is also in the mind. Everything is in the mind. But with them is more surrender, absolute surrender, but it is under the mind. Of course, they use reason, but Westerner tries to understand with his head, and therefore makes those kinds of pictures, all kinds of constructions, and yet he feels no God. And an Oriental experiences, of course, with his heart, and he wants nothing, everything in simplicity, etc. And then, therefore, we say the Creator has chosen one people, and then I'd like to talk a bit about that. So we'll see what it is. We will see that it is not nationalistic to have a special love for something, but just as we have said here, that the higher has only pleasure in giving to the lower, and the lower needs to make himself small for the higher. And look at this situation. What has it received? The land of Israel, a small strip on the Mediterranean, and it does not belong to the East, not to the west, sits between all continents, between Africa, between east-west, between all three. Look, they do not belong to east nor to the west, these people, and they feel at home in the west and they feel at home in the east. Why is that? What is that for a strange people who have actually been given enormous responsibility and to whom all the laws of the universe have been entrusted? What we have to do with it. I have. You say, for example, I am a Christian. What have I to do with it? I try briefly for this time to build that up tonight to tell you that. Just watch and really try not to offer any resistance. Just take it in. That is the difference, which is perhaps a good word, experience. An Oriental feels more than he thinks. His feeling is also integrated with the thinking. Absolutely. And man cannot do without thinking. A Westerner is more of a thinking being, less feeling. What is that? Feeling for a Westerner, it is something else. It's more thinking. The idea is he tries to understand with the mind. Understand, perhaps all, and an Oriental tries with his feeling, tries to feel, and a Westerner tries to understand. The idea is the Creator wants us to make no separations that we do not understand. And what is better than to understand? We learn all that, because understand, that's the point. But the intention is that we do not grant priority to feeling nor understanding. The intention of the Creator is that we experience. Experience. Experience means something with your mind and your feelings. You cannot make separation anymore with what you experience. It's like you sit and you worry about nothing. Not only that you then sit central in a certain posture, lotus posture, then you experience nothing. A scorpion that comes in your carpet and nothing happens to you, he's like a stone. That is why they do not die by stabbing of a scorpion. Why not? Everything is made in agreement of quality. If someone matches himself from the inside, is like a stone. Yes, you can see them sitting in lotus pose, beautiful, amazing, what they can do, magnificent. I remember once seeing something on television, a Chinese who lifted heavy weights with his penis. It's obviously a huge achievement. I see in everything Kabbalah. You know it. Why? That man had also used some Chinese philosophy already many years, that is. What does that mean? Everything is in agreement to quality. If man develops his own lifeless nature in himself, then of course there comes a scorpion with him and he stays alive. One can even bury himself for 40 days, buried in the ground, and nothing happens to him. Why? He is then just like Earth. He is similar in properties to Earth. You know what I mean. He is human, but chooses his lifeless nature because man has everything in himself. He also has his lifeless nature. We will all learn this. He has vegetable kingdom in himself, animals and human. A man can take pleasure, for instance, in earthly, of stone, which is what they do with meditations. He is therefore completely one with it, with the kinds of lifeless nature. Do you know what I mean? And man must elevate himself, absolutely elevate with the human nature, find peace, but not in this nature of plants. His sense of plants is an ingredient in himself and not in his animal, not in his human nature. Okay. And now we go step by step, because it's always been a bone of contention, because that one does not understand. Also, this chosen people cannot understand its own role. We still do good. We are good citizens, etc. We have the least crime and all kinds of other things, but still. And the whole world is watching these people and does not understand what is, and everybody feels instinctively that from this nation must come something special. And we will learn. Do so that you see a little what it is, structure. We said that at some stage of the development of the structure of the worlds, did it come that a higher and a lower. That, we have said, higher is, let's see figure 42.2, marked with a dot. This system of higher has lowered its lower portion to a lower step. Can you now, at every level, also the creation be found back, except, of course, in, and we have said in the world of Adam Kadmon, plus the first reception, or partzuf of the world Atzilut. And that is, the first partzuf is Atik. For the first reception, everyone sees where Atik is. So the Atik is the first, which is in the Atzilut, and is, as it were, connector between Adam Kadmon, between the first reception and the next. But for the rest, from Arichanpin down to the human being, everything is constructed in the way that the higher step has put its lower step in the lower. And we always talk about higher, upper and lower and under. When we talk about above, also on our site, you can see much. It's given to him from above, or so. If it comes from above, we talk about the system, the structure of the worlds, and we always speak from and beneath sit Avi, which means father and mother. Just watch later, we will see what it all is. We have already seen that Keter and Chochmah are located here. See drawing 42.2. And under it sits Binah, Ze'ah, and Malchut. And now we will look further. And now comes the next. We still talk about Atzilut. This is the world Atzilut, so upper reception. And then it is the Avi. And that is, the next is Ze'ah. And again, Keter and Chochmah. And then again, Binah, Ze'ah, and Malchut. Again, the lower. That lower drops again to the next. Then again, one more. And that is Malchut. Kingdom, Malchut, of the world Atzilut. And then this ends the world Atzilut. And then we have Parsah. So basically here ends the receiving of Or Chochmah, the light of life. And underneath comes still three worlds as well, built this way. Also a piece of Malchut has sunken in the three worlds. And then comes Bria, Yetzirah, and Asiyah, all the same way. And then comes yet our world. I mean experience, only experience of our world. And there is again Asiyah, a small piece in our world. The lower part of Asiyah is also present in our world. Binah, Ze'ah, and Malchut also sit in our world, in the experience of our world. If a man of our world now goes elevate himself, as it were, tries to do his best, what is he going to do? What does a man experience when he begins Kabbalah, to read a book? At first, he was completely a child of our world. All good people, all children, went to synagogue or church, and suddenly he's going to take Kabbalah lessons. What will he feel? Perfect, and then suddenly he feels depression? Why? He goes directly to feel those Binah, Ze'ah, and Malchut of Asiyah, which are in him, in his inner self, who had experienced in himself. Before that, he experienced only a story, a religious story, moral story. You should be good. You need this. You must be that. Experience. He experiences the story, but not his own kilim. Do you understand what I mean? That is a difference between general religious man and a man working on himself. General religious man believes in the story. And that's good. It's preparatory stage. It is still development of the group mind. But when a man suddenly feels in himself the need to, with his own kilim, with his unique way, absolutely unique, and not we are all this and we are all Orthodox or Protestant or all that, but above that you come. Okay. I and the other person, he says, but also beyond that I still have. I feel my own kilim, my own inner self. Not story, but own kilim. And then you also feel that moment a kind of depression. Not depression naturally. Depression means you went already too far in sitting in the dark too far, too long. You must recognize that you are already in darkness and not sit beyond it. And feast on that. You must. We will all learn. That means you need to experience the bottom of Asiyah. From the lowest of the Malchut of Asiyah, so the lowest. The Malchut of the Asiyah, which has thrown you a kind of a lifeline. And that is all the construction that we call above. If we talk about the system of the worlds of forces, which are there, of course, that man is. We have said man is the inner part of the worlds. Man sits in the worlds, means here in the Bria, Yetzirah, Asiyah, of course, are also souls. That means experiencing the worlds within his soul. So humans in our world are only in our world, in the sense of our world where he experiences 100% physical. But man can elevate himself that he is in Yetzirah, occasionally or permanently. The idea is, of course, that we as we increasingly do that we permanently, for example, reside in one or the other phase of Asiyah. Where you are staying is up to you. And therefore my wife said yesterday, yes, yet a man then has no free choice, that he too, that is his fate. Why doesn't he study Kabbalah? She says. And yet there is no fate, I mean destiny. A human being, every human being, has in himself absolutely everything we are now talking about. It is subject to anything else. You see that. That's that building, also from the Creator, that anyone can find himself. The building obviously exists with respect to the whole creation, in general, but also exists in the personal view. Look very carefully now. The Arichampin, is inner regarding the Avi, Abba V'Ima, where it is put in. This is outer. See drawing 42.2. Each next lower form of light is outer towards the higher. Any underlying step is a klipa, peeling, a casing with respect to the higher one. Look, we can portray it so. If we present it so, then A'a is, of course, Ein Sof's in there, but we say so. A'a, Arichampin, and it's like a sphere, referred to figure 42.3. And there is Abba and Ima, lower, which is like a nut, a walnut. Walnut, if you have a walnut, you have a shell. And from the inside are all kinds of compartments, and everywhere is a small piece of walnut. Walnuts are inner part, and it is therefore called shell. And in Hebrew, it is called klipa, peel. And we also call it impure forces. What does it mean? When something contains light, shines, which means that we are dealing with intersection. When we feel that we have to do with the peel, that we sit in the dark, as it were, sitting on the dark means that we experience the shell itself, experience the casing. But look good. A'a is the inner, and Abba and Ima regarding looks like its relative of which we speak, Avi. So lower regarding Arichampin is shell. This is crucial, like here, look good. Abba V'Ima is shell of A'a. You should see it as a shell. It is again darker, and inside is A'a. And if we go on, and we will see that Avi is inner towards Ze'ah. It's outer. Remember well, look good. Do not remember that, take it in. Look closely at the system. So the one above, or what we say inside, look good. I had huge problems with this to understand. If we say from the top down, often we say that when we speak of the spreading of the light from the top to bottom, if we speak from the inside out, then we speak from creation. Then we speak seen of man. Then it is always within me, as Ein Sof means infinite light, with all kinds of clothing, all kinds of casings, and that are also worlds, Partzufim. If I each time work on myself, what do I do with it? Look, that is our world. So my experience of our world. Here I am only in the material. If I raise strength and grab onto Bina, Ze'ah, and Malchut, to the part of the lowest step of Asiyah, then I am therefore pulled up to experience, to the same. Because if the lower comes to the higher, it is also higher. That is the law. If lower comes to the higher, it becomes just as higher. Means that if I do my best and not ignore the lower part of the lowest part of Asiyah, which then pulls me up, just as the educator, youth worker, pulls the bad boys up step by step, and that means that if I already came on the first step of the lowest stair of Asiyah, of the spiritual, which is one of those casings, from that first shell is no shell for me anymore. You know what I mean. Which for me was shell. Casing is only when I do not experience it. If I do not experience it, then it is for me a shell. Casing means just like a cloud, a spiritual cloud. If I push through, also means that I desire from within for it, ask for it. That is prayer. To get through the shell of the walnut. Do you understand? And each time it is just as hard to come by, just as it is difficult to get through the shell of a walnut. So you must also see that it is. But if every next stair as we experience, it means that you came through the shell, all shells. Another name of the shell is screen, anti-egoistic power, masach. If I have built the smallest anti-egoistic power in myself, what does anti-egoistic power mean? Not for myself. As I have built the smallest means that I have drilled through the smallest shell, can see through the shell. It disappears, as it were, from my perception. I have no shell less than I am closer to the light. Then I'm going to continue working on myself. And that's why this art of Kabbalah, only that man can. Look, some people, for example, go to work on that and they come up to here, for example, Asiyah, and then they stop. It's enough. And the idea is that you have to work further until you break through another shell. That means that you can see, experience what occurs there, what experience it gives, and all that is within you. Every human being has that inner. If you pierce your inner, you understand your inner self, your own inner. You must desire, pierce through all the matter, which has very many shapes, refined shapes. You must want to break it. And then each time you come closer to the light in yourself. Okay. Is the principle clear? This is your inner. Just like your inner, you also have such a thing in yourself. But that's in the worlds, in the spiritual layers, forces which are also present in all of us. But there I am, my soul. Souls can also sit in Yetzirah. So all souls. It can't be thought of without the souls. It is the system, of course, of the forces of the universe, and if the man comes through his soul, if, for example, it comes to the Bria, and it will experience the whole Bria, means by all these shells can I come through, then that means for me that they no longer exist. I mean the casings do not exist, that I already live in the Bria. Do you understand what I mean? That the distance between me and the Ein Sof and above me is above all is Ein Sof. When we come to Arich Hampin, it means that we have come all the way to our fulfillment, but also as we have the lowest stair in Asiyah below. Look, so we should say, every next stair that I have not trodden is for me Ein Sof. You understand? Everything I have not been able to experience is for me Ein Sof. You do not have to look at the general Ein Sof. Of course, the general Ein Sof exists for all humanity. It must also, again, but your Ein Sof. You should always watch your own kilim to your kilim. You are now here. And if you have the smallest, the smallest thing you do not yet experience, then that means Bina Ze'ayin Malchut of the next stair. From the smallest next step is for you Ein Sof. You see that? Everyone can see it because you still cannot handle it, because it's for you still the appearance of Bina. When you look inside and you experience these Bina, Ze'ayin Malchut, then you feel it as dark inside yourself. What does that mean? As long as you do not see light in it, as long as you do not correspond with Keter and Chochmah, as long as you do not match that bottom Bina, Ze'ayin Malchut of the next stair to properties, remains the Bina, Ze'ayin Malchut for you as Ein Sof. If you already experience, it is already light. It is when you go along with Bina, Ze'ayin Malchut of the higher, then as it were, you will be pulled up. And then suddenly next day you stand up and suddenly you see dark again. And then you say, what is that? Yesterday everything was light. I felt happy and that. And now depression. Who among you has not had a depression? When you work on yourself. Everyone has had a little bit. What is that? each of your actions you feel you are egoistic, yes or no. That's how it is. You must know that depression can only be pushed beneath you against your inner piece of your inner self, where there is no life. You understand? Then that means you just have to go on, but you do not go through because certain forces are somewhere else, but to feel your inner self. Because if you want to match, if you want your fulfillment, then you must, from within your inner, you have to try to climb up all those stairs, but you should not think of another stair somewhere else. You should always engage yourself with you, with the lower part of Bina, Ze'ain Malchut, which you personally experience, because that is what the Creator wants, that you only occupy yourself with that, and not with all kinds of other stories. With that, you come into line with the higher powers. That is the law of the highest, most important law of the spiritual, agreement to quality. Why do we feel depression or discomfort, etc.? Because we do not agree with the spiritual, with the laws of the universe. We want to receive, so too, once you want to receive, any time when you want to receive for yourself, selfishly, you become cut off from the eternal, from life. Remember that. And if you feel that you suddenly feel depression, you should not immediately take a drink or something else, or devise another trick, but you have to work on yourself. Everything is up to you. Absolutely no fate. If I'm in that environment and grew up in that environment, and that my father is this, my mother is that, my neighbor, all sorts of excuses, everything is within you. Absolutely. No fate plays a role as a man begins to work on himself. If you are not going to work on yourself, then fate does play a role. What is fate? That you're like nature. Look, in the morning the sun rises. Then all these little plants turn themselves toward the sun. All in the same way, and when suddenly the temperature will drop to -20, then they do not have an understanding. For example, pear trees have no understanding to put on a jacket, for instance. It is simply abandoned to the fate of nature. And man, when it is -20 degrees, is going to sit at home. I'm not working. Do something at home or work with the computer. You go. So you also should do in the spiritual. You also have to deal with that way. And then you have no fate. No fate can target you or play the boss over you. Absolutely not. From each criminal, a wonderful human being can be made. Definitely. But not in the way as society does. Or if someone is behaving badly, they'll give him electric shocks. It's atrocious. In a good way, you can deal with any human being, even if retarded or wild, psychologically, completely, and not as they do, beastly handling it. Because he has a soul, absolutely clean soul, so he always has the chance to elevate himself spiritually. And because they do not know what to do in psychiatry, etc., they do that. If you understand that, only the outer casing of him is damaged. If you bring in such a way a human being to his inner, then through all the pain, through all the damage he had with his psyche had sustained, he comes then deeper than the damage done to him by whoever. Naturally by himself. And then he is stable and can just move on. For the spiritual, there is no handicap. Remember what I say. No man is handicapped in the eyes of the Creator. Naturally, no disability. You know what I mean. No man is so damaged spiritually that it is not correctable. It is absolutely so, but we do not believe that it is so. Even a man born with absolute brain problems, which it is not curable. Not curable, only matter is not curable, but the soul is perfect. Everyone understands it. No soul is damaged. No man comes here on earth with a damaged soul. Such a thing does not exist. Only, of course, with deficit correction, that's up to us. Us is given to make an effort to choose life rather than death. Everyone understands it. Therefore, never look to another, to whatever handicap to a human being that he's less in your eyes. In the eyes of the eternal, he's absolutely okay. Also, if a child is born, for example, indirectly with brains, various diseases, and dies immediately, correction. He needed certain correction we do not understand to make a certain correction. There is a story about Baal Shem Tov. They brought him a holy baby. They brought him a baby, a newborn baby, and it was recently circumcised, and now it has died. Directly died after circumcision. Everyone crying, and his mother takes him to Baal Shem Tov, and he took the child, the great Kabbalist, from them, and he was a divine man, absolutely. From him, all Chassidim mercy came. He was absolutely divine man, and he had the child in his arms, and he began to preach, began to overcome, asking higher to blow life in if it can, and he was answered. Answer does not mean that such people think that God speaks to man in words. We said words are mentally, and heart is also not. It's everything together. It's experience. No Kabbalist. Moses never heard the words of the Creator. It says the Creator does this or does that. Experience. He said, build the temple in this way. The tent of meeting. As I have shown you, so experience and not words. So also this great Kabbalist, Baal Shem Tov, he took the child and began to swing it. A bit of dancing. Why? To, for a moment, detach himself from all the earthly things. And suddenly, everyone saw that he was happy, began to radiate. This rabbi, while everybody was imprinted by death, there is always tremendous joys to Jews as a child is circumcised, and then suddenly, and everyone saw that there was joy, and his great disciples, who also began to dance because they saw light at that time. And he declared, he said, that was the soul of a very big righteous, a great rabbi came in this child. He was born in this child, and that rabbi who lived in very difficult conditions of the Tsarist Russia, in a difficult situation in which it was forbidden for Jews to do circumcision. And he was a great one, and it was forbidden to him. He has observed the whole Torah, was a great one, but he did not do the circumcision. He could not do it that way. It was forbidden. Enormous misery at that time, and the people, they were checked. Was misery. And then his soul came into that child to do that one correction. And after the circumcision, it was no longer necessary for that child to live. For our earthly mind, it is, how can it be? How could such a thing? A child is innocent, or something else. Everyone understands it. Refer to drawing 42.1, the written material, the mutual commitment between the spiritual worlds and their elements. And refer to drawing 42.2, discussing the materials of the mutual commitment between the elements of the spiritual ladder of the worlds and the outer and inner. And refer to drawing 42.3, also discussed in the materials, the written materials, today's lesson, the display of the spiritual worlds as inner-outer. The more inward, the more interior, and vice versa.